Welcome to My Life. If you live in northern Oakland County, you probably are familiar with the Dominican Sisters. Their convent has been on Drainer Road for many years. Formerly known as the Dominican Sisters of Oxford, they are now called the Dominican Sisters of Peace. In 2009, they joined with 6 other orders and took on that name. These sisters administer another Oakland icon called the Lourdes Senior Community. This began in 1948 when the then Archbishop Edward Mooney asked the Dominican Sisters to care for the elderly in their former convent on the shores of Scott Lake in Waterford. That small home has since grown into the Lourdes campus, which includes Fox Manor Independent Living, the Mendelssohn Home Assisted Living, the Clausen Manor for Dementia and Alzheimer's, and the Lourdes Rehabilitation and Health Center for long and short-term care. Lourdes has been voted the best of the best in Oakland County for the last 2 years. For 24 years, the person in charge was Sister Frances Mary Krnasevich. She has been a Dominican sister for over 65 years and recently retired. We're glad to have her on our program today, along with Sister Teresita Lipar, who's been a Dominican sister for over 50 years and who is now the Director of Pastoral Care, taking over one of Sister Frances Mary's old jobs. Thank you so much for being with us on our program today.
Well, we're happy to be here.
When you hear all that, you were here to see a lot of that happening, because when you started here, this was just one building. It wasn't the old convent, but it was just the Lourdes building, and that was it.
That's right, and it opened in 1965 at the request of Cardinal Dearden, who said, we need a Catholic nursing home in Oakland County. So he said to the sisters, if you give me your property in Pontiac, it was Pontiac at that time, we will put up a nursing home and the sisters will administer it. So, under the guidance of Sister Lucille Blisman and Cardinal Dearden, the project went up. It was a 100-bed skilled nursing home for people who needed skilled care for their loved ones.
Now, Sister Teresita, when did you first come here to work at Lourdes?
I served on the boards of Lourdes for about 25 years while functioning at Oxford in the capacity of a manager of the Mother House. And then last year I came to assist Sister Frances Mary in the pastoral care department. And at the conclusion of that assistance, on October 1st, I took over as director of that position.
25 years, so you both have seen most of the changes that have taken place.
We've seen a lot of growth, you know, and I'll tell you, it was it was really the vision of some of the staff that initiated the buildings. You know, one time, one of the nurses came to me and said, Sister, there are some people here at Lourdes that really do not belong here. They're here because they're undernourished or they're dehydrated. So we need to build a facility to take care of those kinds of people. So I presented the issue to the board. Sister Teresita was a member of the board, and I said, you know, this is what our nurses are seeing and what's happening here, that some people are coming for long-term care that do not need it. They need some help. So what I did at that time was I sent Sister Sue to a management company called the Formidable Management Company, and I said, please go and learn how to run an independent senior house.
Now you're talking about Sister Sue McMahon?
Yes, I am.
Another long-time
member of
the order and worker
That's
at
right.
Lourdes.
That's right. She was here for many, many years.
Did you think that that was a problem at a lot of nursing homes back then?
Well, I think so. I think people were placed there because the families didn't know what to do with them. You know, so they're not eating properly, and they're not, you know, drinking enough fluids. And so, you know, I know many of the people would say, we make meals for Mother, we put them in the freezer, and they stay there for months because they just don't take them. Or we'll take them a meal and they throw it out because they don't want to eat by themselves. Who wants
Sure.
to eat alone? So what has happened was the board said, well, let's look at building a senior, independent senior apartments. So at that time, we said, well, let's look at building something, and we had a major donor, Mr. Fox, Harold Fox, and let's use his donation to put up Fox Manor. And so that's how it came to be. So that in 1991, Fox Manor opened with 57 independent apartments. And that's how that project began. And then, let me tell you what the nurses said again.
Here's the rest of the story.
This is the rest of the story. They came and they said, Sister, some of these people here at Lourdes are having strong memory losses and Alzheimer's. So they don't belong with they're physically good, but mentally they're gone. So sister, let's talk about putting up a facility for those people who have some type of dementia. So again, go to the board and said to the board, our staff thinks that we need a facility special for people who are suffering from Alzheimer's. And so the board said, let's do some more study and let's see if we can raise some money. So we went out and we began a campaign, capital campaign, and Mrs. Laureen Clausen's husband was a resident here at Lourdes, and Mr. Clausen was suffering from dementia. And so we said to Mrs. Clausen, I think that would be a good project on the Lourdes campus, so we could take care of those people in a better way, on a one-to-one basis, rather than having them in a skilled nursing home. And Sister Sue, and we applied for a grant, a matching grant with the Kresge Foundation. And one day, we went to see Mrs. Clausen up in Grayling, and Mrs. Clausen was very interested in the project, and she said, now how much do you need to match the grant from Kresge? And Sister Sue said, well, we need right now $394,000 to match the grant. She said, well, I can write the check, but I can't give it to you today. Well, Sister Sue was delighted. She wasn't even looking for the money. She was looking for a pledge. I would take a pledge.
But she was willing to take the check.
But she was willing to take the check. So probably a week later, Mrs. Clausen sends us the check. And that's how it got the name Clausen Manor, because it was after her major donation.
Okay, we have to take a quick break, but we'll be right back where you can pick up the story.
Okay.
So don't go away, we'll be right back. Here with Sister Frances Mary and Sister Teresita at the Lourdes Senior Community in Waterford. You were talking about the progress of the Lourdes Senior Community, one step at a time.
Right.
And where we left off, I believe Mrs. Clausen was getting ready to write a check.
She was. She wrote a very generous check. And so Clausen Manor got the Kresge grant as well as her very generous matching donation. So Clausen Manor never had a mortgage. It was paid off completely. Now, very humbly, she said to me, "Sister, I don't want to be named Clausen." And I said, "Mrs. Clausen, it's appropriate." I said, "If you don't want it after your name, it could be after your husband's name, so we'll just call it Clausen Manor." She said, "Okay, as long as it's just Clausen, not Laureen Clausen." So it's Clausen Manor. And it's a beautiful building.
Indeed.
20 private rooms, and it was built after much study so that the central area would be where the residents would come together, and the rooms are surrounding the entire area. And residents love it because their rooms are all named. They have their names on their rooms, and they recognize their pictures, so they know where their rooms are. And most of the day they're spending in a common area. And then there's also a very lovely enclosed garden that is secured so that they can't get out. But they have raised gardens there, they have swings there, they have picnic benches there. It's well used in the warm weather.
So what happened after Clausen Manor?
After Clausen, we have a very active and focused staff. The staff said, Sister, let's look at continuing the process so we could have a whole continuum of care.
They didn't want to let you sit still, did
No. So they said, let's consider something for those people that are in between independent senior housing and those needing skilled care. Some people just need someone to provide their 3 meals a day, to provide give them their medications, and to see that their rooms are neat and clean. And so that was the thought of what we call Mendelssohn Home. Now, again, we need money to build these projects. So we go after major donors and consulted with the Mendelssohns. And Joe Mendelssohn's grandfather was originally the owner of this property that was deeded to the Dominican Sisters of Oxford back in 1939. Mm-hmm. So Mr. Mendelssohn came out and saw the property, loved the property, saw the nursing home, and we said, we're looking at possibly building something that would be between skilled nursing and independent, and so that would be an assisted living facility. So the board had a vision that an appropriate building should be put up, a signature building, and one that would attract people who would need that kind of assistance. And so that was begun, the project began, and I think it opened in 1999.
I think so.
I'm not real sure of the date, but it's close enough. And so it has all private apartments and is generally 100% occupied. And Cardinal Maida came one day to see one of his priests, and he said, "My gosh," he said, "this looks like the Hilton." And he said, "This is a nice place to live when you're a senior." But anyway, it is a very lovely facility for those people who need assistance. And what's nice about this campus, because it is a continuum of care, we have people that begin at Fox, then move to a Mendelssohn home, which is assisted living. Then sometimes they go to Clausen, sometimes they skip Clausen, and then they come to Lourdes for their last days.
So you can pretty much
So
cover all the steps.
It's just takes care of the elderly who need our services.
Was Mendelssohn, is that the latest in the...
That's the latest
steps?
in the steps. And then most recently, Sister Maureen Comer, who took my place as CEO, said, Lourdes is 50 years old, and we need to begin doing some renovations. And so she worked with the committee and some of the staff to determine what was needed here at Lourdes. And one of the things that we needed most was rehabilitation. We needed the rehab center. And so I think that the rehab will draw people to improve their health. And the rehab staff is marvelous. They are really a wonderful team. They do marvelous. So many of the people that come from hospitals for rehab end up being discharged home to their own homes, and they love it here. They love the rehab, and rehabilitation is the big thing now for seniors.
Well, it's not only an important business, but it's a big business right now.
It is, and I know my sister, I'll just give you a little scenario. My sister had surgery, hip replacement surgery at St. John's Hospital in Detroit. And she's well into her 80s. And the hospital said, well, we're going to send you to a nursing home real close to the St. John's Hospital in Detroit. And she said, no, I'm going to go to Lourdes. And the hospital said, no, we're sending you to this nursing home. She said, no, I'm going to Lourdes for my rehab. Well, finally, they agreed to send her to Lourdes, so she came here for her rehab. She was here on Medicare, and she spent the 20 days that was allowed, and she said this was the best rehab that anybody could have. She said it was better than the rehab at the hospital, even though she had a few days at the hospital. She said, I think people ought to go to Lourdes for rehab because they do such a great job.
As you look back over all of this, and I'd like you both to answer this question, what has amazed you most about your experiences here on the Lourdes campus?
Well, I think for me, it's the loving care that every resident is treated with respect and dignity. And I have to tell you a little story. When I first came, I didn't know I was such an ogre. But one of the friends of mine met one of the former nurse aides who was a nurse aide back in the 80s. And she said, I was walking the halls and I saw a bed that wasn't made properly and I ripped it apart. And I said, do it again. I thought, did I do that? Would I have done such a thing? But I guess I did. And I think, the dignity and respect that these people deserve has to come from everybody. Everybody has to.
We need to take a little break right now, but we're going to come back and ask Sister Teresita that same question.
A small town with a lot of heart and history. A hidden gem with a sense of community. Welcome to Leonard.
Back with Sister Teresita and Sister Frances Mary here at the Lourdes community. Sister Teresita, it's your turn. You've been here for a lot of years and you've seen a lot of changes. What has amazed you most in your experiences here?
The loving dedication of the staff is very important, and I see that exhibited among all the staff members, the CNAs as well as the nurses, the doctors, those who clean the floors. Just everybody here is so dedicated and so loving to the patients. I also recognize that the board who supports this foundation and who has worked diligently with Sister Frances Mary in the past and is currently working with Sister Maureen Comer, they continue to emphasize the importance of loving care and pastoral care for all of the people that come here to Lourdes. So older persons, we have a woman who's 105 right now. We have younger persons in their 70s. It doesn't matter how old they are. Each one gets the type of care that they need, individualized care and love. Each one is, each person working here is very dedicated and sensitive to what the need of the individual person is that comes here as a resident on the Lourdes campus.
Now, it's easy to talk about, first we built this, then we built that, then we built that. But while all this was going on, laws changed, requirements got more stringent, things got a little more difficult. What could you tell us about some of your experiences in that regard?
Well, you're right.
As you're trying to put some of these things together, there had to be some hair pulling.
There was. And, you know, always the annual surveys, you know, were very trying on not only on myself, but on the entire staff. You know, the state would come in and do their annual surveys, and these laws were changed, and this was changed, and there was always something new that had to be done. You know, for example, I know, you know, for example, when we were going to build the chapel at Lourdes, I went to Lansing to ask for permission to build a chapel because our chapel was next to the dining room and it was very distracting during any services. So I said, well, let's go see if we can get a new chapel built. So the board was supportive of having a new chapel, so I went to Lansing and I said, we need a new chapel and we need permission from the Michigan Department of Police. Now, why the Michigan Department of Police gives permission for building, I don't know. But anyway, so they told me, this is the size of the chapel that you can have. Well, it was like a broom closet. I said, we have 108 residents. This is not big enough. And they said, well, this is all you're allowed, so many feet for every person. And I thought, that's a broom closet. And they said, but you could, you know, you could build it into something else. So I said, okay, let's make it a multi-purpose room. So when I went to, I said, we're going to do a multi-purpose room, and then we'll just close off a sanctuary with a electronic door that will close so that we can use the rest of the room for other purposes. And, you know, one would suppose that they would be happy to have a big chapel, but it's like, that's the law. Yeah, this is how many feet you get for every resident, maybe 2 feet for every resident. So those kinds of things, you know, Lansing has control, and they control everything.
With all this change in healthcare, has that affected places like the Lourdes community very much?
Well, I think what has happened is more and more people are staying home longer, and home health is growing. People are not coming to nursing homes. You know, years ago, the only kind of facility for the elderly was nursing homes. Now there are all kinds of facilities. There are, you know, residential homes, there's group homes, there's independent
Do changes
housing.
in Medicare have anything to do with that?
Oh, sure they do.
Yeah.
You know, the reimbursement for Medicaid is very low.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't cover the cost of the actual cost of care for a resident, because when you're thinking of a nursing home, you're thinking of nursing staff 24/7 and sufficient CNAs to take care of the residents. And there's, you know, people say there are never enough CNAs. Well, you know, it costs money to have a lot of CNAs. And, if you give a CNA more than a certain number of people, they say, we can't do it. We can't care for that many people.
What is your biggest worry about the future of this sort of endeavor?
Well, personally, I think the numbers of residents that are going to be coming to nursing homes is going to diminish, because I think the other levels of care are going to increase. I think rehab is going to be very important, and people will stay for limited amounts of time. I don't think you're going to have people staying 20 years in a nursing home anymore, as we did back in the 80s. In fact, I remember when I first came, I said to our medical director, I said, Doctor, I think Mrs. X needs to go home, because she was here for hip replacement surgery and she's doing fine. And he said to me, Sister, you can't send her home. She's psychologically dependent. She was here 20 years. Today, if they're here 20 days, they're going home.
Sure.
So, I think that the number of residents in nursing homes is going to diminish, or their stay is going to be very short. And that's why rehab is so important. So I think that if you want to build a clientele, you need to have a good rehab program. And I think that's what's important for people.
I want to turn to Sister Teresita for a minute. We've been leaving you out. I'm sorry.
We don't want to leave you out, Sister Teresita.
Now, you are the pastoral care director, and I believe that was something that Sister Frances Mary did for a while before you came in. Am I correct in
That's
saying
correct.
that? Okay. Tell us a little bit about your role in that position.
In this position, we try to make sure that the people have all their spiritual needs met. They get some visits from the chaplains that we have here on the campus. We have Mass each or twice a week here at the nursing home and at each facility. The sacraments are offered to each of them. If there's a need for someone who's dying, they need care, or their families need care, one of the chaplains is available to communicate with them during those times of crises, or letting go during the palliative process.
Now, I know this is a Catholic nursing home. Obviously, you are both Catholics. But you have people of other faiths here too, don't you?
We do. We have interdenominational services, which we set up in all the facilities on the campus for those to meet the needs of those persons who are of other denominations of faith.
Okay. We've got a whole lot more to talk about, and we're going to do that in our next segment with these ladies, Dominican Sisters of Peace, whose mother house is in Oxford on Drainer Road, you probably know, Sister Teresita and Sister Frances Mary. So please join us for our next edition of My Life.
Canine Stray Rescue is Oxford's own local dog rescue. Each year they take in hundreds of dogs and bring them into suitable homes. A certified nonprofit organization, Canine Dog Rescue strives to give pound dogs a new leash on life. To donate, adopt, or even volunteer, call them at 248-628-0435 or go to their website, dogsaver.org, and click on the Canine Stray Rescue League link.
You're watching OCTV, Oxford Community Television, serving Oxford, Addison Township, and the village of Leonard.